Over the next 10 episodes, I'm going to share a completely different way to build a coaching business. Welcome back to She Coaches Coaches. I'm Candy Motzek, and today we're starting a special 10-part series, Build Your Business Like a Coach. So I'm going to be sharing this completely different way. And it's a way that creates consistent clients without you having to feel salesy. It's a method that doesn't rely on constantly posting on social media, and you don't have to go and sell to your friends and family. Doesn't require you to spend your nights and weekends at those large, big networking events, hoping somebody is going to hand you a referral. Now, if you're a thoughtful coach and you want a calm, authentic way to build a thriving business, you are in the right spot. So let's start with a question. You're a good coach. You know you can help people. You've invested in your training, you've coached clients, and they've had breakthroughs. So why aren't you creating clients consistently? I think it's one of the biggest questions in our profession, and it's a painful one because eventually it turns into another question. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Now, if you have ever thought that, I want you to hear me right now. I don't believe that most coaches struggle because they're bad coaches. I think they struggle because they've never been shown a reliable way to create consistent clients. And those are two very different problems. And they've got two completely different solutions. So, have you ever looked at another coach and thought, wait a minute, they're no better of a coach than I am. So how come I always seem to have problems? Why do they have clients and I have problems signing clients? It's an honest question, one that most people will never say out loud, but they wonder and they think about it. They might quietly wonder, maybe I need to hone my skills more. Maybe I should get that certification. Maybe I should just improve my website or my branding. Maybe I need to take time and really figure out that Instagram algorithm. I should start posting more often. Or maybe I just need a better niche. Now, before long, you're trying everything. You've tried a little bit of Instagram, a little bit of LinkedIn, some networking, a webinar. You've created a lead magnet, a newsletter, another course, another strategy, always hoping for that thing that is going to finally create a steady stream of clients. Now, if you've been coaching for a while, you probably know what that feast and famine feels like. One month, you sign two or three clients. When you exhale, you bring this big, huge sigh of relief. You finally say, this is it. My business is working. Then you get busy coaching and marketing slips all the way down your priority list. Now, a few months later, one client graduates and then another, and suddenly your calendar starts to look a little empty and that knot starts to form in your stomach. You know that one, the one where you wonder where your next client is going to come from. So you go back to posting, you go back to those networking events, back trying to be visible. Then you sign a client and the whole cycle starts again. It's exhausting. And it's not the kind of business that most of us ever dreamed about creating. Most of the coaches that I work with are experienced professionals. They're midlife people who have had successful careers. They're thoughtful, they're intelligent. Many of them are introverts, or at least they're people who would rather have meaningful conversations than spending a whole evening balancing a wine glass and a napkin and a tiny plate, giving small talk to 50 strangers. They're busy. They've got stuff going on and they have responsibilities. Many of them are raising families or they're caring for aging parents, and building a coaching business is important to them, but they're doing it alongside a demanding career or a significant life. They don't have 3 hours a day to create content. And they actually don't want to be influencers. They don't want to spend every Tuesday morning at a breakfast networking meeting helping somebody, hoping somebody might need a coach. I didn't want any of that either. Now, here's something that I noticed. The moment that coaches decide it's time to sign more clients, something changes. They stop thinking like a coach and instead they think they have to be like a marketer. Suddenly the questions become, how often should I post? What platform should I be on? Should I be on Instagram or LinkedIn? What do I need for my funnel? How do I beat that algorithm? What about a lead magnet? Should I grow my email list? Now, none of those are bad questions. And I've asked every one of them myself. But here's what's fascinating. None of those questions has anything to do with coaching. Think about that. You've spent months, maybe even years, learning how to coach. You've invested your time, your money, and your energy in becoming a coach. You know how to ask thoughtful questions, how to listen intently, how to build trust, notice patterns, and how to help people discover things that they couldn't see before. Then, the moment you decide, okay, it's time to start growing my business, you think you've got to put all those skills on the shelf. Someone hands you a marketing playbook. Post more, network more, tell everybody you're a coach, ask your friends who they know, send the DMs, stay visible, keep feeding that content machine. And I don't know about you, but none of that is why I became a coach. So, one of the things that I hear over and over again is this: Candy, I hate selling, or "Oh, I just don't want to be pushy. I don't want people to think that I'm desperate." Sometimes they might even laugh nervously and say, I feel like a used car salesman. And every time I hear that, I smile. And certainly not because it's funny, but because it tells us something important. It tells me that this is somebody who cares deeply about serving others. They don't want to pressure, they don't want to manipulate. They want somebody to choose coaching because they feel genuinely understood. And I think that's a strength. That's not a weakness. And I think that we've somehow built this industry that tells thoughtful coaches that they need to become someone they're not. And I disagree. I think there needs to be a better way to create clients, a way that feels like coaching. A few years ago, I realized that I didn't actually have a marketing problem. I had an information problem. I was guessing. I was guessing what people wanted, guessing what to post, guessing what they struggled about, guessing what workshop they needed, just guessing, trying to chase. And every week I felt like I was starting over. And then one day I asked myself something completely different. Not what should I say, but what don't I know yet? And that one question changed a lot. And this is where the consistent client method begins. Let me repeat that question, because that one question really changed everything for me. So instead of saying, what should I say? I started saying, what don't I know yet? And at first, it seemed like a small shift, but it completely changed the way I built my business. Because when I stopped trying to come up with the perfect message, I started looking for understanding instead. I got curious, really curious. And I wanted to know what coaches were actually experiencing, not what another expert said, not what social media was showing me. I wanted to know from coaches themselves. So I created the Coaching Business Growth Survey. 115 coaches from 10 countries participated. Some were in the early stages of their business. Others had been coaching for decades. There were executive coaches, mindset coaches, health coaches, life coaches. And these were people from all walks of life: doctors, engineers, all walks of life. These are people who had built successful careers and were now building a coaching business. And I thought I was going to learn something interesting, but I didn't expect that it was going to completely change my business. As I started reading through those responses, certain patterns started to appear over and over again. And there was one finding that really surprised me. Nearly 70% of those coaches who had responded had 5 or fewer clients. Think about that for a minute. Now, you may say, well, maybe they only wanted a handful of clients. And that would be a really reasonable thing to say. But that stat, the 70% with 5 or fewer clients, that coupled with 90% of coaches who say, I want more revenue and I want consistent client flow. So in their eyes, the number of clients was a challenge. And these are coaches who were experienced. They were well trained. They had credentials. They were well educated. They were getting referrals. That meant that they're good at what they do. So clearly the problem wasn't their coaching ability. Now, that was the first clue. And then another pattern emerged. And when I looked at the coaches who consistently had clients, 10 clients or more, they weren't just posting more. They were posting, but it wasn't just more. And they weren't all using the same marketing strategy. They weren't using paid ads or complex funnels. What they had in common was much more human. They had conversations. They had relationships. They generated referrals. They spoke on podcasts. They networked in meaningful ways. They were speaking at summits. They were building relationships. This was important. People knew them. People trusted them. That finding stopped me in my tracks because suddenly I realized, wait a minute, we've been focusing on the wrong thing. We've been trying to create more content, do more broadcasting, when what we really need are meaningful conversations. Content has got a place. I love podcasting. I've been podcasting for 6 years. You're listening to this episode. I write newsletters. I send emails. I write LinkedIn posts. But content works best when it's built on understanding, not guesswork. And that realization became the foundation for what I now call the consistent client method. The idea is surprisingly simple. Instead of trying to convince people that you're the right coach, become the coach who understands them better than anyone else. Let me repeat that because it's really important. So instead of trying to convince people that you are the right coach, become the coach who actually understands them better than anyone else. Everything else grows from here because when you deeply understand your dream clients, you naturally know what to talk about. You know what to write. You know what to do podcast episodes about. You know what kinds of stories are going to resonate with them. You know how to describe their challenges because you've actually heard them. You no longer have to guess. You're just reflecting. And this is a completely different way to build a business. Let me tell you a story about Kirsten. She is a wonderful example. She is a dog behavioral coach. I've worked with her. She's helped me with my dog, and I can't recommend her enough. She works with entrepreneurs and professionals who work from home and whose dogs are making their workday maybe just not as relaxing as they'd planned. Now, she could have done what most coaches do. She could have just tried to create more content. She could have wondered what to post every week. But instead, she started conversations. She invited 250 people to participate in her insight report. 76 of them responded. That's about a 30% response rate. And then something remarkable happened. Over the next 4 weeks, she booked 13 conversations, 13 genuine conversations. Nobody felt pressured. Nobody felt pitched. People wanted to talk to her because she wanted to understand them. Think about that. Curiosity opened doors that marketing couldn't. Those conversations gave Kirsten language. They helped her with confidence, with stories, with ideas, a really deep understanding of the people she wanted to help. She wasn't just finding clients. She was becoming the obvious person to help them. That's why I don't think that the consistent client method is really a marketing system. I think of it more like a relationship system. It's a curiosity system and it builds trust. And yes, it creates consistent clients, but it does it in a different way. So instead of chasing clients, you become genuinely interested in the people that you would love to serve. Instead of trying to sound impressive, you become fascinated with them. Instead of wondering what to post, you start sharing what you've learned. Can you feel how different that is? One approach feels heavy and pressured and rushed, and the other feels energizing and open and curious. One asks you to perform, the other asks you to be curious. And as coaches, we are really good at curiosity. So why wouldn't we want to build our business the same way? Now, I am not suggesting that you're never going to market. Of course you will. Marketing is a part of business, but it's how you approach it that makes a difference. Of course, you're going to need a website. Of course, it's helpful to post on social media or to have a podcast or to speak on stages. Those things do matter 100%, but they're not where I'd start. I'd start by understanding, because once you really understand your dream clients, everything else becomes easier. Your content is easier. Your offers become easier. Your messaging becomes easier. Even sales conversations become easier because they don't feel like sales conversations. They feel like coaching conversations. So let me leave you with one question. What if your next client doesn't come from creating another piece of content? What if they came from one meaningful conversation? And what if that conversation led to another and another until you stop worrying about where your next client is going to come from because you've built a reliable way to create them? That is what this entire series is about. Over the next 9 episodes, I'm going to unpack a whole bunch of pieces about the consistent client method. You're going to hear stories from coaches who have used it. You'll learn why it works You'll discover how it creates authority without pretending, confidence without hype, and clients without feeling salesy. Now, because I believe that thoughtful coaches deserve a thoughtful way to build their business, I'd love to send you a copy of my free Authority Lab case study. It's the story of how one simple project, one that I ran, became the foundation for podcasting, for my speaking opportunities, for my offers, and for a steady stream of client conversations. I think it will help you see what's possible when you stop guessing and start getting curious. You'll find the link in the episode notes. And until next time, keep asking those great questions because the best coaching businesses aren't built by shouting louder. They're built one thoughtful, meaningful conversation at a time.